These are 16 file types that don't show their file extension on the Windows desktop or File Explorer, even when the Explorer setting to view file name extensions is toggled on. And that's something that you, maybe as a red teamer, penetration tester, ethical hacker, or a defender, hey, cybersecurity practitioner working to detect new threats, this might be something that's a worthwhile trick to be used for social engineering or some trickery and deception to fool an end user or victim into clicking on something that will offer a little bit more code execution persistence, whatever the case may be. You can get creative and have your imagination sort of run wild with this if you'd like, but let's say I just created a new text document from quick and easy right-click Windows desktop. I could make this whatever I wanted to, chrome.txt, but remember, I'm sure you probably know very well, a .lnk file extension for a Windows shortcut file could be something that hides its file extension even when that setting is toggled on. That's number 1 in our list, but you probably already know all about Windows shortcuts and LNK files. Not everyone knows about number 2, the .scf files. And we've showcased these in another video if you're interested in their use on, hey, gathering some credential hashes, maybe used for further access. But number 2 in our list, if I were to rename our, again, chrome.txt that we started with, say I'll hit F2 on my keyboard, get the hotkey to change and rename this file. Let's make this a .scf file, and that now, again, hiding its file extension, is known as a file or shell explorer command .scf. But again, we've showcased that previously, and maybe you knew about it. But did you know about number 3 on our list, a .pif file, .pif? And if I may say, credit where credit is due, this is all coming from Grigorez Tworek, and I always get your name wrong, my friend, I'm sorry, but Og Tweet over on Twitter or X, and he sends out this awesome newsletter with super cool information, details, new tricks, and research that you might be interested in. But look, one of the most recent ones was on the program information file. And this is what kind of got the gears turning in my head to understand and explore this a little bit more. It discusses how Explorer will usually hide hidden in system attribute files. But of course, you could change that by, hey, making the different setting tweak or adding other desktop.ini configurations. But some of these executables might hide their file extension, like .lnk, .scf as we've seen, and another .pif. The program information file was designed in the Windows 3.x era as a way of providing a launching shortcut, giving not only the path, but metadata such as an icon, parameters, etc. Now that was replaced with .lnk files, but of course, Microsoft, Windows, working with that backwards compatibility, well, okay, we're still keeping that .pif file alive. Now, this is neat. If you wanted to try it yourself, you could copy your executable, rename it to a .exe.pif, and observe how it works. Blah, blah, blah. Hey, kudos, credit where credit is due. This is a phenomenal, I think, little tidbit here and a worth interesting thing. Because I noticed he said something peculiar. He said, to make it even more interesting, enabling file extension does not enable them all, as we've just discussed. But during some of his research, he's identified 16 different Explorer extensions, file extensions that Windows Explorer will ignore, regardless of the settings. And I was thinking, whoa, 16? Like, I know about maybe the 1 or 2 and maybe a couple others here, but I thought that would be worthwhile to drill down on. So I reached out, responded, and asked. I said, hey, would you happen to have that list of those 16 file extensions that Windows just doesn't show? And are you totally comfortable sharing them? And do I have your blessing? Are you willing to let me, hey, maybe showcase that, demo it in a video? And super duper grateful, always standing on the shoulders of giants. Can't say thanks enough. He says, sure. If I recall, it's these. Now this could be fun to play with. So I've been working in a Windows 11 virtual machine, just flat vanilla install. I have toggled and disabled completely nuked Defender, but look, we can go play with this thing and let me actually create a list. How about I paste in everything that we were working with, and let me just save this as file extensions.txt. Sure, that's totally fine. So here is our list, and we've gotten our LNK file already covered, so let's add a nice little check mark there. And maybe the .scf file, that one's especially interesting. Let's say the green check is because we could probably weaponize it. Maybe do something clever with that. The check mark on the pif works just as well, since that's basically, we can go and create this, just an executable or another shortcut file that we could access. Look, let's rename our chrome.pif. Actually, you know what? let's get calc or notepad in the mix. Let me go into C Windows System 32. I'll grab just a calc.exe. That's fine. We'll just have a copy. So super easy, super dumb. All we do, hit F12, rename the file .pif now. And of course, that will hide its file extension. My icon is gone, but can I double click pif? Yeah, that opens up calculator. Wow, that's lead hacking. So number 4 in our list is a .account picture /ms file. So we can create one of these. Let's get back to old reliable chrome.txt, rename, change that file extension to .account picture. Stack MS. Let's save this, and now, oh, we got a cutesy little icon. Hey, I don't know, you could fool someone, their user profile, maybe a contact list, maybe shortcut on the desktop if you're setting some, I don't know, some operation, some assessment campaign up. But oh, double clicking on this gives a fun little error. Account picture error, setting the account picture failed. Please try again. Now, obviously, this is a blank file, but I'm left wondering, what could we do with this file? So just to speed along the showcase, I asked good friend or reliable ChatGPT here, and I say, look, what is the contents of a .account picture, and how can I customize the functionality of that kind of file? They say it's a file format used by Windows to store user account pictures. We could probably guess that. They are usually in the user profile directory, so we could get to see users, our username, way over in app data roaming, and then this subdirectory. That typically, if I copy that path, file, it typically includes 2 images of the user account picture, one smaller resolution and larger resolution. Blah, blah, blah. We could play with it if we'd like. I'm curious how it puts both of those in there. Maybe it's some sort of archive, but we could just create one naturally if we wanted to by creating our own profile picture, or we could go see if any even exist in that directory. Let's go see, hey, just maybe see if we can open the contents of that file. So back in our virtual machine, let me get back to my Windows Explorer. Let me paste in that path. I'll adjust just my username. I am John H on this box. Look at that. And that folder is empty. So bummer. We would need to go ahead and set one, but I don't think I'll be able to. I don't think I can personalize this machine, your account info. Change your account picture. Yeah, I can't really personalize my machine because I'm using a evil virtual machine. Unactivated. Anyway, considering this is seemingly just kind of letting us change the settings of our account picture, but not allowing us to invoke or run or spawn or execute other code, either programs or applications, things we might do for some tradecraft or tricks, it's not going to be super duper useful for our interested use case. Unless I'm wrong, and I could be totally wrong. Please let me know in the comments below, but for the time being, let's go ahead and mark number 4 off our list. What's next? appcontent.ms. And no surprise, obviously changing the file extension here, that is going to hide the file extension. Chrome on its own now, seemingly doesn't do anything if you double click it other than give this error, element not found. So now I'm curious, what could we do with a .appcontent file? Here's what my crash course ChatGPT tells me. The appcontent.ms file is a type of file used by Windows, particularly related to the Windows Start menu and its tile system. This file format was introduced with Windows 8 and Windows 10 Start menus as part of the functionality that supports live tiles, allowing applications to display dynamic content. Oh, interesting. Okay, so like Windows 8 Metro vibe theme? I'm not quite positive, but it looks like it offers some XML data that defines how an application's content could be displayed within the tile and Start menu, etc., etc., etc. I'm curious. Ooh, XML, that's plain text. We could write and play with that. So I say, hey, can you give me an example of what that might even look like? Now, we could create this and have presumably a example app with a sample live tile and a couple images for a logo and thing there. At least surface level, maybe there's some other oddities and things we could do, idiosyncrasies with the XML schema. But again, we're just changing some settings here and colors. I'm not sure if there's any malicious processing, parsing, weird stuff that could happen in rendering or working with the XML data. Look, that's probably going to get some low-level stuff. Typically, these are placed in the program's directory within the Start menu folder structure. We have a path here we could go explore, but those would just be the programs installed and set up in my Start menu. But if we created one of these with the XML content, then it won't even automatically integrate it into the Start menu, apparently, because it might need to be actually handled and processed, manually worked with by the program itself, the application. So that I don't even know we'll have good use cases, or maybe we write something that works with that as a file and blends in. I don't know, we could use that as some sneaky tradecraft, but maybe that's biting off more than we can chew right now. I don't want to boil the ocean, but I am happy to get schooled. So again, please tell me if there are a little bit more goodies in that file type that we should dig into, but let's mark number 5 off our list. Now what is this appref.ms file? And I'm not going to spend too much time on this because this is oftentimes used to work with click once applications. And click once applications are fascinating because it will just be an icon that goes stages and pulls down another remote location installer and program to run. Kind of neat. It's just like a single, oftentimes used for initial access vector as well. But that is quite a cliff to fall off of. So let me just show you, if you believe me, if I can prove it, the .fref ms file will be just really trying to stage and pin up this click once capability. Now, the details here are normally what you would see with any click once file, but obviously this isn't staged whatsoever. You would need to have some other things on a remote server that it can pull down and use, and be a full, complete click once file installation deployment tooling. Not a lot that we could dig into with this on its own, but if we decorate it with others, then you'd basically just be using click once as your technique and tradecraft and trick here, maybe not strictly this file on its own. But that's good to know what it is, and the icon that might come with it. Just simple, including the shortcut icon arrow that we might be used to. So, hey, keeping us cruising, can you tell I'm a little bit anxious trying to get through all 16 of these in like a compact little YouTube video here? Let's keep going. Let's get to our .desk link, which is an interesting one, I think, because of one oddity. Let's get back to our desktop, play with our chrome.txt, but I want to make this a .desk link file. Now, this has a cutesy little icon, and I'm curious if there's more we might be able to do with it here, but double clicking on it, it actually doesn't have a handler. Like, there isn't something configured, staged, set up for Windows to even recognize and know what to do with this type of file. So potentially you could stage this in registry, maybe add some handlers and some program capability to interpret, run with it, do with it, and that might be a neat trick. I think we might start to run into some issues if we play with the registry to manipulate and configure these different file extensions, but I'll show you and we'll get into that in just a little bit. Let's get through our list first. When I ask ChatGPT what a .desk link file is, they say it's a special type of shortcut file used primarily by Windows, similar to the .lnk file that we're already used to for Windows shortcuts. They're not commonly seen because Windows handles them internally, which is odd to me. It could have some metadata to include the target path, arguments, working directory icon file, usual things that would come with a .lnk file, but they don't typically display these files and they manage them on their own. They're not meant to be manually edited or created directly by the users. Sounds interesting, but is there even runway for us? ChatGPT doesn't give us a whole lot more when it's talking about editing .desk link files. It basically says, hey, just don't do it, bro. So in the conclusion, maybe we could just ask, can you give me an example of the contents of a .desk link file or files? It's kind of just regurgitating the exact same data. It really does not want me to use a .desk link file. Granted, I don't know if it is like a full-blown binary file that like ChatGPT can't give me. Okay, yeah, so it says, look, they are not plain text files, they're binary files, much like .lnk files. So it can't just spit it out for me to copy paste. If we did, of course, try to create just a regular .lnk shortcut file, but gave it a .desk link file extension, I'm sure it would work just as well. Looks like we can build something up in PowerShell, so maybe that's worth playing with. Let me just stage this in another text editor here, but obviously this is going to end up creating a real .lnk file. Let me say, hey, something on my desktop. Zoom out a bit, but this can be just a calc.desk link file as the file extension that we're interested in. Of course, that could probably just go to C Windows System32 calc.exe. Working directory can be with some System32 is fine. Windows style, yeah, it doesn't matter. Icon file, I don't care. I think calc will work just fine even as an executable file there. Let's try that. Copy paste, put that into PowerShell. Let me get back to my desktop so we can see this as I run it. But if I just drag this over here, paste that all in, okay. Oh, that's really interesting. It's bloody because PowerShell won't even let you do it with a different file extension. Man, why is everyone against this .desk link file extension? It has to be a .lnk for PowerShell to do it with WScript shell. Neato! Let's cut our losses on that because my goodness, we have been talking for a while and we are still like what? Like just about halfway. What's a .library ms file? Of course, if I rename this file, change the .text file extension to .library ms, again for a simple blank file, ooh, we've got a new icon here for a library. Double clicking on it though it whines, chrome.library ms is no longer working. It could be safely deleted. So odd. It should be a presumably Windows library file, which is a thing if you've never heard of. Apparently a Windows library that's primarily used in Windows 7 and onward would aggregate content from various locations, both local and networked, into a single logical view within Windows Explorer. So you could basically bucket different places, and they even use that for like their documents or some of the special folders and icons that you see like music, pictures, and videos, presumably. It is again just a simple XML file that contains a configuration for this. It gives us an example here, and we could go ahead and try it to see if we can get into and view just our documents. Looks like it even lets us change the icon, which might be interested for some social engineering schemes, or even if we could configure just what's displayed as it opens Explorer, maybe that could be some sort of hook or lure for just another trick or trap you'll put on maybe a target. So here's the thing. Can I even paste this in and see this work well if I save it as a .library.ms file? Let's just say, again, anything dot whatever, library tag ns, save this. Back on my desktop, we have our anything, but if I double click this, oh no, it comes to life here. Anything.library.ms is empty though. No folders have been added. So we might have to add one. Literally does not matter. Put back our desktop. This folder could not be included in anything. Why is that? What are documents? Could not be included. And the name of the file. That's odd. I guess I really should have changed the username in here. I wonder if that's just making things weird or breaking it. Sorry, I know I don't know, but it's worth kind of experimenting playing with. No, even that needs me to install and add another folder on its own. Everything that I click though says it cannot be included, and literally the name of the file. Can I just make this like ha 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 ha? Include a folder, desktop. That's dumb. All right, let's not waste our time with that anymore and put a check-in check mark on there. Looking good. Let's move on to a .mapi.mail file. Haven't seen or heard of that. Of course, going back over to our file extension, .mapi.mail removes the file extension and gives us a neat-so little icon. It gives us a mail service as a description here, but double clicking on this seems to do nothing. ChatGPT tells me that a MAPI mail file is a relatively less known file type used in Windows environments associated with the messaging application programming interface, which is used for handling emails and other messaging functions and applications. Oh, that's actually kind of neat. I wonder if that opens the door for anything interesting. Typically, these don't contain human-readable text or symbol configurations that can be edited directly in a text editor. Instead, they contain binary data specifying commands or actions to be performed by the MAPI-compliant email software installed in the system. That has to have some interesting runway, especially if it's like commands or actions. I wonder if there's oddball stuff there. Maybe that's worth another video just playing and digging around with it. MAPI Mail is part of legacy components of Windows, particularly in older versions that are tightly integrated with that usual MAPI. Not something you could easily edit, but you could trigger, some default apps. Interesting. Ooh, I wonder if that's a setting that you could kind of clobber, and maybe then that could be used for weaponizing, maybe that kind of file type, again, hiding its extension for execution. In which case, you could probably just use an easier, more natural technique, but maybe that hides a little bit more. I don't know if folks have detectors for a .mapi mail file. I guess even that is kind of a hard argument to make, though, because at which point you might as well just add a file extension type for anything that you want, which again, we've showcased in other videos and could be done for these that don't have a specific file handler set for them, like .desklink or even others if we find them. Let's see what MyDocs does. But first, a quick word from today's sponsor. Do you ever feel like you need to complete a million tasks at once while the security of your application is resting on your shoulders? That's where our sponsor, Snyk, comes in. Snyk is your inside helper in the world of application security. With Snyk, you can find and fix vulnerabilities in your code in real time and get the security intelligence and remediation advice that you need without disrupting the development workflow. So get peace of mind with Snyk and sign up for a free account today using my link below, jh.live/Snyk. Huge thanks to Snyk for sponsoring this video. .mydocs, slap that in. That gives us a nice little Explorer folder icon again, but ooh, that one does not have a handler stage, so we could set that up with creating some of the registry configuration settings. But we'll talk about that more soon. And actually, now that I'm thinking about that, I tried to showcase the .desklink functionality and that it might include a .lnk file, but that wouldn't even have worked if it didn't have a handler set and stage for it, right? MyDocs, do we need to even look at ChatGPT for that dumb thing? Because would it open documents? No, there's no connectivity by default or interaction interpretation for what that file type does. Anyway, I'm rambling, I'm sorry. Let's think about our .search connector file, which presumably is used for a search connector, which I've never even heard of before, but that is the Open Search Protocol, also used by web browsers and search plugins, allowing and enabling, both combined words, to use Windows and search remote sources or to find local content directly from Windows Explorer. Once again, XML data, and you could seemingly configure, search terms or what you would like to search for. We could try to create this, but I'll admit I haven't seen that thing actually work all that well. All the details that ChatGPT tells me, you just kind of plop it in, you distribute this file out, and then maybe it's a thing that could work. So if I open, again, another editor in Sublime Text, go over to my desktop and say a mine.search connector, TAC-MS as our file extension, connector. Make sure that has the OR, not missing anything. Now this should probably have some search terms actually defined here, so let me change this to like, I don't know, the C drive, doesn't matter. Or just like file, how about that? It literally could be anything. Problem is if I try to minimize this, go click on my, oh, where even is that file? Oh goodness, I like didn't even see it because it blended in so well. The icon's there, it looks just like a natural Windows thing. Double clicking though, I'm not getting anything. Maybe that syntax is wrong, maybe there's an error being thrown, I have no idea, there's no visual feedback, but cutesy little icon could work with. Presumably you could again maybe even change or toggle this icon with specifying it, but if I toggle this value, change it to like 210, anything other than what it was, no real change, so I'm not positive if that's working as we thought it would. But at the very least, there is no file extension, so let's call that one good. Let's add our checkbox and move on to .search TAC-MS, which I think it might be pretty similar, right? A search MS file is used to save a specific search query within Windows Explorer. Ooh, that's kind of interesting. It is a file containing more XML parameters, and hey, you could configure this for whatever you might be looking to search for, with certain leaf conditions, it looks like, for the file name or size representation. Is that max or anything? No, I guess it doesn't matter. Now we could try to see this, or we could even create one generally with a save search option inside of Windows Explorer. I've never seen that before. I think there's a protocol like search-ms:// some of the protocol handlers. So you could play with those. And I think we've seen that in even Felina, like MSDT, the MSDT Felina hack CVE 2022, I forget what year it was, 4040. So anyway, I'm sorry, I'm reaching out and beyond the void right now. Let's get back into Sublime Text and let's create our search.ms file that we could, I don't know, maybe look for a query of anything in, let's see, documents. Let's look for the word file. Since this file is called file extensions.txt, maybe we create this. Let's save it on our desktop as mine or whatever .search TAC-MS. Type that correctly, hit save. Back on the desktop, look at that little icon. Double clicking on this. Do I have the syntax wrong? Is ChatGPT lying to me? It did say that we could potentially create our own though, just naturally making a file kind of that type and example. If I were to search for file, and again, kind of recreate that inside of the file explorer itself, could I then save this as a search? Search options doesn't really give me a whole lot to work with. Close, pin, options. It gives me a couple of configuration things that I might like, but it doesn't seem to let me like save this. I might just be clicking through it too fast, but I think if I actually pin this to quick access, here I have that little entry on the left-hand side. I could then right click and maybe see a couple more options. Look at that, save search, okay? So that now could give me on my desktop a file.search.ms. Now, if I go open that file up in Sublime Text, or if I double click on it, of course, it brings open Explorer to perform that search as it should. Let's go see what that looks like. This is our bad mine.search.ms, but what is our file one that we saved here? Oh, it won't even let me open it. It just invoked the search inside of the browser. That's kind of neat. All right, let's drag these into each other then. Dragging that on. There we go. Now our file.search.ms looks a lot messier, or at least with just a heck of a lot more contents here. Different leaf conditions, what we actually searched for, even the author. That's interesting. I don't know if you can consider that metadata really here, but look, we searched for the word file, and that seemed to be just about everywhere. That was probably a bad example to use because it's kind of hard to tell what it was really staged in the file type. Let's toggle this to please subscribe, just to see if we can manipulate that portion of the file. Double click on this, but no items match our search, and my Windows Explorer is doing weird stuff where I can't actually see anything. So I don't think it actually modified what we were looking for in the search though. Let's go ahead and call that good for now. Might be worth playing with, but again, it is added to our list, the 12th on the 16 file extensions that don't show their file extension, regardless of the settings. Next, let's get into the setting content TAC-MS file extension. You know, I kind of really hope that this one gives us like a sweet gear icon like the settings, and then maybe could be potentially weaponized or set with some sweet tradecraft. Here's a .setting content TAC-MS. Let's save this, and I just get a blank document icon, but no file extension, so I can't complain. Double clicking gives me element not found, like we saw previously, but what could we do with this thing? A .setting content TAC-MS file is a specific type of configuration file used by Windows, particularly in Windows 10 and later. It allows users to create shortcuts to specific settings pages within the Windows Settings app. Ooh, Interesting. It is again XML, but it even gives us a URI, display name, icon. Nice. Again, more of our social engineering scam. Keywords and contents that we could just toggle and play with. Can I use one of these? Let me copy that code and see it in action here. Let's get back to our text editor. Just slap this in and save this on our desktop. Testing.settingContent.ms. Save this. Now we have our testing file. And if I double click on this, oh, no, still whines. Element not found. Okay. It didn't even set the icon to what we seemingly specified here. I don't know. I can't trust this syntax. I think ChatGPT might be lying to me and we could go Google, but look, we'd fall down the rabbit hole. Wanted to showcase the file extensions themselves, but it looked like this would just prompt like a protocol handler. So can I just run calc, or what is it? It's calculator, right? Yeah, I see it in my history. Calculators / that should do :/ I should learn how to talk. Calculator. I don't think this will work though. Yep, still whining. So that syntax must be wrong. I did try to do a little bit of research on this though, trying to wonder, hey, what the heck this thing is. I see a sweet blog from SpecterOps, 2018 timeframe though, and even some stuff from Trend, and hey, maybe a little bit of other examples and things we could learn a little bit about more. Ooh, Bleeping Computer article way back when. Proof point, hey, with a little article for some threat actor, 505 and CTI, good stuff. Shell command execution. See this? Oh, that's 2023. Maybe there's some good stuff in here. This is Matt Nelson's article way back in 2018, but he's staging things like, hey, other initial access vectors like HTA files, Office macros, VBS.js, a lot of these things sort of fallen apart because of deprecation. Hey, Windows, Microsoft trying to phase things out. Talking about some of the ASR rules, attack surface rules that might be able to, or attack surface reduction capabilities. That is the right acronym, right? Yeah, okay, cool. Interesting. They have a sample where they just fire up control.exe based off an icon and an app ID in the mix. That looks like it has a lot more settings than what mine does from what ChatGPT gave me. Oh, they're talking about that deep link element that we saw in some of the results, and maybe we could potentially execute one of these. So that's what's giving us the capability to run calc or do any other sort of code execution. Looks like they have a little demo talking about Mark of the Web that would be worth digging into soon. But look, do you have an example? Do you have a sample, something that I could play with? A couple ASR rule communication, etc., etc., etc. Wrap up defenses. Give me a POC. There we go. You can find a proof of concept setting content file below here in this gist. Oh, but they did report this to Microsoft. And again, this is way back in 2018. So I'm presumably seeing, yep, wait a second. They say that it's below the bar for servicing and the case will be closed in June. And then in August, they issue a CVE. A little odd. Am I misinterpreting that? Is that like a little under the table sneaky stealth patch? I don't want to be throwing stink on a little Microsoft, but okay, so it created 6 years ago, but this is seemingly a proof of concept file. Let's go see if this will work for us. If I copy and paste this, a lot of the good celebration here. Some other folks chatting about it back and forth. Oh, and someone says, yep, this was patched 2018-8414. Does it express that a little bit? They talk about it here. Let's go see. Like if I paste this in now with all that, we should ideally see calc.exe invoke from deep link, but I really doubt it's going to happen here. This is our testing file. Double click. Yep. Windows won't let you do it. Haha. What did all the other Google results come back with though? This is, okay. Yep. Just another proof of concept in a GitHub repo. Here's a Bleeping Computer article that talked about it. You can see the payload muffled into that deep link directory. Some malware authors and probably threat actors were experimenting with that. Man, we missed the boat by 6 years. God, I'm so dumb. I'm so far out. I'm so detached. You know what? Nothing wrong with it. Good to learn a little bit more of the history here. And it's all about awareness. Oh, but they do have a Sigma rule for it on detection.fyi. So that's pretty cool. Neat. Again, if you even see this, if it comes to life as it was patched seemingly like 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Anyway, setting content is finally off of our list. Let's add a checkbox on that. And let's look at the others. .url and .website sound seemingly simple enough. But .zf sent to Target, never heard of before, and very curious about that one. A .url file you have probably even seen before, and that it's like a window shortcut to internet locations, like websites. You could do the very same with like a .lnk, but you might even be able to play with this a little bit more if you, hey, set up an internet shortcut file with like a .url where you could presumably even change the icon file. I don't know, I'm thinking along the lines of like the SCF file where you have the 2 backslashes or a UNC path and maybe that'll do something odd and funky. We could experiment with it, but hey, maybe that's a whole nother video project. Wait, you can define a hotkey like keyboard shortcut that when pressed will launch the URL from the desktop? That's wild. Would it even know to do that? How would that happen? Let me just, okay, example.url on our desktop. Now, obviously, this does not have the .url file extension. If I double click on this, it brings me to example.com. Okay, the icon I don't see taking place though. I don't know how you could map a hotkey there. Maybe that's worth experimenting with. Can I try to set that to like a, I don't know, something stupid, another calc.exe, will it rip out the icon? Or like a shell, dll, index and ordinal there? No change. Let me do like that image res.dll 27, but even that doesn't work. I could just be stupid. ChatGPT might be lying to me, but man, we still got more to cruise through. Next, we have a .website file that's seemingly a more advanced version of the .url file. So that's peculiar. Again, a little bit more, hey, INI syntax for configuration, where you could even specify a zone ID identifier, which I think is neat and interesting in case there are any potential later downloads, in case those would have Mark of the Web on them. I don't know. I could be totally wrong, but again, that might be worth playing with. Maybe a little bit more settings here. I'm curious if that icon file would again work this time. Creating a testing.website with the example syntax they gave us, we can see that actually has a Explorer icon, like Internet Explorer icon, and it'll open it, in this case, in Microsoft Edge, which I think is interesting. It goes straight to just maybe the built-in and installed browser rather than maybe the default. But changing the icon is not going to really work here for me. Trying to calc.exe or anything else, again, maybe that'll reach out to another share. We got to find out and play an experiment. But let's finally get to our last in the list of 16 file extensions that do not show their file extension with a .zf send to target file. Now this one I think is neat, because if I rename our chrome.txt as usual and a .zf send to target, it actually gives me a .zip file icon, and that .zf likely stands for a zip file. If I double click on this though, again, does not have a handler. We could experiment with this, but I'm kind of curious, what the heck is it and why is it being associated with zip files? So again, stupid dumb summary. We could go do our own more research, but that could take a little bit more time. Look, the .zf send to target file is typically associated with compressed shortcut files created by Windows send to context menu options. Oh, when you use the compressed zip folder option from the send to menu, when you right click, Windows will create a compressed zip file, but temporarily gives it a .zf send to target file extension during that process. Once it's done, then it reverts to a .zip extension. Whoa, I know that's not really like a life-changing thing by any means, but I thought, oh, that's a little cutesy, that's neat. Is that like a thing that we could just create when it's send to in this case? Like dragging a file onto it, or actually being able to tinker with that will just compress it? Let me go check this out, right? Obviously clicking on this does nothing, but if I were to actually get to the documents where I was creating this list of file extensions.txt, if I simply drag that onto it, yeah, like a send to thing, it creates a compressed rendition of it. Even a smaller file size. The compressed one is 281. Well, look, I guess it's just plain text. It's not going to be much. 254. What the heck? The compressed one is bigger than the .txt file. Okay, whatever. It gave us another trick though. If we do shell send to, that actually opens up all of these options for the send to things. Oh, and wait a second. A lot of these are like, oh, a desk link file, maybe? Oh, and this was the .mydocs file. And this is the .mapi mail file. They're all like presumably associated with creating these in the moment, but you could hide their file extension because the capability to do this, right? If I double click on documents, it is a .mydocs file. Mail recipient the same, but if I were to like drag a file onto that, it will start to email. Interesting. If I drag it onto a desktop short link, it creates a shortcut. Coming together, all makes sense. I wonder though, if you could actually set up the program handler for like double clicking on these things, and again, making that lure a social engineering deception trick, could we make those changes in registry so that it could invoke anything we want? Something like a .zip file, or at least a zip file picture and icon, might be a worthwhile thing that could get clicked on the desktop, and if we fires and executes something else, maybe that's a cool persistence trick. And now we're done that big long list of 16 different file types that don't show their file extension, but I don't think we're done with this video quite yet, because there is one other Easter egg that I think is worthwhile to mention. Because in the previous video, when we were looking at those .scf files, remember number 2 in our list of file extensions that don't get shown in the GUI here, there was a user, Dermarcus1982, so big shout out, kudos, credit to you, my friend. This this is pretty sweet. And yes, I do read the comments. Look, this will never show its file extension, quoting me as I was speaking. And he clarifies that's only true as long as the never show extension or ext registry value is present under shcmd file in hkcr/.scf, which was one of those registry hives and locations and keys and paths that points to hkcr shcmd file. And I thought, oh, interesting. I'm curious. Let's go see that in action. If I had my new file, new text document.txt, as you can usually see the file extension, let's make that a .scf. Going back to that example, of course, file extension is now gone, but if I were to open up the Windows registry, I'll use regedit, registry editor, fire that up. Say I navigate to hkey classes root or hkcr to .scf, which would bring me to, a default entry to shcmd file. That's what it would point to, so I could get to that location, shcmd file. And sure enough, there is an entry in here, never show ext. Now, if I were to simply delete this key, I'll hit delete and enter and save this thing. Whoops. Now, if I refresh, or I don't know, F5 won't particularly do it for me here, but can I restart Explorer? Let's get a little bit bold. Let's do it. Let's do another terminal here. Now I've staged a batch script here that I tend to use to try to remove temporarily the activate Windows watermark in the bottom right. That will restart Explorer, and if that actually goes through, finishes it all up, check it out. New text document.scf. Now the file extension is visible. So I'm curious, is that the case for every single file that we've just reviewed in that list of 16 file extensions that don't show them? Like a .pif file. Looks like that redirects to the no dot in this case, but just simply pif file. There's that key again. Same thing for .lnk, and I don't think I need to drag you down this rabbit hole. I'm sure you get the gist. But that presence of this registry key determines whether or not the file extension is shown, even with those GUI settings, or the Explorer toggle drop-down checkbox of whether or not you see those file extensions. Now that got me thinking, can we hide file extensions for even things that don't normally have this set up with these default registry keys being present? Again, I could delete these, hit delete, and that would toggle it, or we could just simply add a new one in, maybe put that back for our never show ext file. But now let's go to some of those other oddball file extensions, like the ones that we thought were the most interesting, right? Our .zf send target, like the zip file that we might be able to stage. Could we set a handler? Could we mess with that? Could we play with that? That was one example, right? And maybe that's worth tinkering with. .zf send a target. Looks like that goes to a CLS ID. Could I play with that? That's CLS ID 88DCA60. So let me try to get to that location. 88DCA60, all of this. Now here's my never show extension file, and we're all the way here for the handling of a send to target and zip folder. Looks like even a DLL capability. You drag files on the icon to compress them, just like we saw. But if I try to delete this, let me go ahead and hit enter here. It's unable to delete all these specified values. Odd. Let's talk about that in just a second, but I did want to show you that, again, if I went to other exe files or any other sort of icon, maybe handler file type that we'd like to dig into, if I were to simply create just that never show ext registry key, maybe you could automate this with a reg add, maybe you could do whatever you wanted to in your tooling or automation scripts or initial attack vector, anything. But let's say we had our calc.exe. Now you can see our .exe file extension as expected, but if I were to restart Explorer .exe again, or say the computer were to be rebooted, or some time would pass, of course. Look, toggling Explorer.exe, we no longer have that extension .exe shown. So we could fake it. We could just say, oh, image.jpg, and now it looks like an image, quote unquote, but of course would fire off a payload or anything that we might stage. Let me remember to remove that before I forget and restart things so I don't accidentally hide executable files on my machine. All right, he's back to normal. Image.jpg.exe, of course. But I'm sure you remember I was just teasing about some of those CLS ID locations or the extension capabilities, registry location stuff that we might have played with for others. And these have some oddball capability or behavior anyway. And that, like, if I were to try to manipulate or change any of these registry keys, it won't let me do it. I can't delete these, and it just errors on everything that I might try to do, which is annoying because if we wanted to add that functionality, like a new program handler or something to actually execute it, do what we want, we wouldn't be able to, at least without some seemingly extra permissions. I'm wondering, like, look, regedit ran with UAC. That actually is going to have whatever administrative capability, but could I do this as like NT-authority system? So let me just fire open sysinternals and psexec, we can do 64. I think it's tac I for interactive, tac S for what we want to run, and like a cmd.exe. Cool. That will fire up cmd.exe. Now I am running as NT-authority system. If I spawn regedit out of this, maintaining all those privileges, could I get to HKey classes roots, CLSID, and then that example was DAC whatever. Even now, I can't delete or modify or edit or change or do anything with these keys. So I thought, what the heck? I'm supposed to be NT-authority system. I'm supposed to be the top dog. But if I take a look at the permissions here, even the account packages users, account unknown, whatever, system, of course, can only read these. Same as administrators, same as users, only the trusted installer account has full control. Now, if folks aren't familiar with trusted installer, that's that Windows, like, fake magical group that will give at least Windows the capability to protect and lock down some files. But that is another rabbit hole, because I'm wondering, could we, and we can, but it's worth another video because I know this one's getting long, we can borrow or assume or impersonate trusted installer to be able to make changes just like this, and that would be worth playing with in another video. But hey, maybe that's a little bit of a cliffhanger, maybe that is a continuation of this video series saga, looking at and exploring oddball file extensions and types, and learning about some of those gimmicks, learning about some of those idiosyncrasies, and seriously, 16 file extensions. There may be more. Let me know if you happen to know some others in the video comments. But like, that's a lot for things that you might be able to hide, play with, and do some interesting stuff with on Windows. With all that said, holy crap, this was a long video. My goodness, I'm sorry I was rambling for so long, but I thought this was neat, thought it was worthwhile, and opens the door for some other conversations, and maybe some registry things that you've never heard of before. Just thought it was neat. With all that, look, please give some love to our sponsors. Big thanks to Sneak for helping support the channel and this video. Check them out with the link below. And I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do all those YouTube algorithm things, like, comment, subscribe, and I'm gonna take a nap.